Hello! Today we're going to do a really quick video on race pace predictions from the various running apps across 5K, 10K, half marathon and a marathon. We are in Barbados for holiday, and obviously you clicked on this video because you want to see how different running apps compare to each other in terms of race predictions. So that's what we're going to do. But this is why it looks slightly different around me today. So we actually did a video on this last year, but I guess the timing wasn't great because we thought it was a good idea to go out and attempt PBs in the middle of Dubai summer heat. And I can tell you it really is a bad idea. What we're thinking to do is we're going to redo it for that reason, but also because when we did it last time, I wasn't really in proper running shape. I had been running with Kema when he was prepping for his marathon, but it wasn't really there. Whereas now I've obviously been training for my own marathon that you have followed along on. I've completed the marathon and also done 2 half marathon just very recently. So we have a very different baseline to compare to, and also maybe more importantly, we also have an actual marathon time for myself to use in the predictions, which we didn't have in the last video. We are going to use the same apps as we did last time. So it's Runna, Runalyze, Garmin and Strava. So let's start with the 5K for myself. Interesting enough, all the 4 apps were actually within 41 seconds of each other, but there were a couple of standouts. Runna actually had me at the fastest, being 23:25, versus Runalyze had me at the slowest at 24:87. So some of you would have seen that we actually did this PB attempt as part of the marathon training block with Kema as my pacer, and in the end we actually managed to get there, but it was only barely. I got to 24:39 versus 24:45, which was my old PB, but when I say it was a lot of pushing on Kema's end, that's probably an underestimation. What that 24:39 means is that Runalyze almost got it bang on, right? It was 2 seconds out, so they were really close. And while we're talking about Runalyze, I think it's also important just to mention the method behind this. So Runalyze uses a huge amount of data, which is great when you're trying to really understand your running. What we did for methodology for this test was that we used the VO2 max with the marathon shape applied. Outside of Runalyze, I think the other apps, they did okay. I mean, obviously Runna was very optimistic, which is not that weird given that I was in the middle of their Runna program for my marathon training. So fair enough. Moving on to the 10K. Here, interesting enough, 3 apps were more or less in the same ballpark, but Strava, I don't know, Strava thought I was on some kind of something because it predicted me at a sub 50 10K, which, yeah, that's not realistic anywhere. So the 10K attempt, it wasn't so much an attempt. I think it was a little bit by accident, kind of. What happened was that we were doing the Runalyze event in Abu Dhabi because Kema's company was sponsoring the event, so he was there to present an award, and obviously Mo Farah was there as well. So it was a really nice event, and we were then thinking, let's just try to do the 10K as well and see what happens. So once again, Kema out here pacing me and me being grumpy as usual. But we actually managed to get to my second fastest 10K ever, so it was a 52:38. It was still nowhere near to the Strava time, but when you do consider that I wasn't intentionally going for a PB, at least not initially, you know, there's probably a good 30 seconds left in the bank. Not Strava time, but faster than the other 3 apps. Moving on to the half marathon. Again, 3 apps are very close. I think they were like something 45 seconds within reach of each other. And Strava, again, giving me all the kind of flowers that I don't deserve. It actually had me at a sub 150. So that's a good almost 5 minutes off my previous PB, which is back in 2023, I think. Not sure where it got that from. This attempt was done at a Birch to Birch half marathon in Dubai, and this is just a week after my first ever marathon. This attempt to begin with was probably crazy from the start. Anyway, the plan was Kema was going to pace me as usual, and we were going to go out quite strong and then try to hold on. We went out strong and I couldn't hold on. So I ended up doing, I think it was 1:56:06, which is my second fastest half marathon time, interesting enough. But in terms of predictions, I gotta give this to Runna, which was the closest, and Garmin and Runalyze, that were quite similar. Obviously Strava was just way out. But I think it's important to just keep in mind, right? This was a week after the marathon, so how right were the predictions actually? Could have I gone faster if I didn't have tired legs? There's a possibility, or that's just excuses, I'm not sure. So marathon distance. Obviously, this is the distance where you have the most amount of time. So there was also the biggest variances between the 4 different apps. I was obviously doing a runner program at the time, and that's probably also why Runna was the most optimistic. I had obviously told Runna I want to do a sub 4 marathon, and it had me at 4:02 or something like that. So obviously, you know, pushing me, telling me that you can do this, right? Then on the other ones, Strava were close to Runna, and Garmin were not that far out after Strava. The one that had the least belief was Runalyze, which, if we then look at the other distances, should kind of tell you where we're going in terms of results. I'm not going to walk you through the whole marathon. There's already a video on that you can watch below. But for the sake of the predictions, we were on for a good sort of sub 4 pace up until I think roughly 30k. There was a toilet break that took a bit longer. But I think the key thing that was in the way of the sub 4 marathon happening was Kema's hamstring going, right? So at that point I stopped, I walked with him for a little bit, and then I set off on my own. Does that mean I would have done a sub 4 if that didn't happen? Probably not, if I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that I had that pace in me for the whole race. So my own guess would probably have been somewhere around 4:10. I ended up doing 4:18. So for this one, I think it's almost even between Runalyze and Garmin. However, you know, given the context of the run, Runalyze is more true to what actually happened on the day, on the marathon, right? Whereas Garmin, I feel like, is actually closer to what I'm truly capable of. And I know now there'll be a lot of people thinking, yeah, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what actually happened. But I do think that the context matter here in terms of what happened. I'm going to give it to Garmin, but let me know what you think by writing in the comments your thoughts. So that was my 4 runs. 2 to Runalyze, 1 to Garmin, and 1 to Runna. Okay, let us then have a quick look at Kema's run to see how we matched up with him. So for Kema's 5K, all the apps were actually within 36 seconds reach of each other. So again, very, very close. However, on that run that week, he did 21:01, which means that all the apps except for Strava actually did quite well. But again, Runalyze taking the lead. So for the 10K, all the apps were actually quite clustered yet again. So they were roughly around something like 61 seconds. What was interesting was that Kema's time was actually a bit slower, like a minute slower than all of them. So the one that came closest was Runna, and that was 80 seconds out. So it wasn't really a great result in that way from all the apps. The only thing you can say was that at least they were consistent, so they all had sort of the same baseline on him. For Kema's half marathon, Runna and Strava had almost identical times. Runalyze was a minute quicker, and then Garmin was an additional minute quicker than Runalyze. However, all of them predicted a sub 140, which is something that Kema has actually attempted before at the London Landmark half marathon. You can watch that video below, but he didn't make it. Kema's attempt for this half marathon time was done at the Rack half marathon, and he went out for this. But as you know, his hamstring is not in the best of shape, so he ended up doing a 1:44:46, I think it was. Yes, 1:44:46. So again, all the apps were roughly 5 minutes out. Was that due to injury or due to him training with me rather than running at his own pace? Combination of both, perhaps? Interesting to have your thoughts, so let us know what you think. What this shows, right, is that the apps do not really take into consideration like either the mental state or the physical shape of the runner per se. They can only see what you show them, but some things don't show, like injuries or, you know, stress, etc. Some of that is not always captured by these apps. But with all that being said, we still have to give it to someone. So for this one, it's going to be Strava. So for Kema's marathon, I don't think we need to go into the details of what happened. We have already discussed this in this video and in the previous marathon video, but let's just talk it through from a race prediction perspective. So Garmin and Runna were really backing him in the sense they actually had him at a 3:30-ish pace, whereas Strava was a little bit more conservative, saying maybe like a 3:50, 3:52, something like that. Runalyze, however, and again, it shows to the amount of data that they're using, were a lot more conservative and saying, you know, you have probably not been doing the kind of training you need to do a sub 4, and had him at 4:14. And knowing that his final time ended up being 4:29 with stopping and walking for the last 4 or 5K, that is probably not very far out, you know. If he would have been able to run for the whole part, probably would have ended up somewhere between 4:05, 4:10, which is actually very much in line with Runalyze. So again, this one goes to Runalyze. However, for the record, I do want to say, I've watched Kema train and run for the longest time, and I know what he's capable of, and he is definitely a sub-4 marathoner. Okay, so let's summarize. Runalyze actually got 4 out of 8. So I think that tells a strong story already. Runna, 2, and Strava and Garmin, 1 each. And we kind of alluded to it throughout the video, but I think with the amount of data that goes into Runalyze, the way they assess your training, the fact that it's device agnostic, there's so many things about Runalyze. I'm not surprised about that result. It actually takes into consideration all the things around you, except for, as I mentioned before, any potential injuries or mental state, but anything else is actually captured in a much wider context by Runalyze compared to the other apps. And this probably sounds a little bit like an advert for them, but this is just my view based upon us using all of these 4 apps on a daily basis, seeing what it does for us from a training perspective, the kind of insights we're getting from them. For us, I think it's really, really interesting to see how the apps actually predict and compare to what you end up doing in real time. I think that's always really helpful to get that kind of data. Let me know what you guys think. Was it helpful? Is this your experience as well? How out or how correct have the apps been for you guys? Let us know. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, so you're notified when we post more videos. More importantly, thanks for watching and take care.